Hi, this is Casey Miller, Positive Coaching Alliance's National Programs and Social Media Manager. I'm excited to welcome you to our first Google Hangout in a series of four. Tonight we're going to be covering the college application process and how we can give some tips on how to get into the college of your choice. We'll be doing 3 more Google Hangouts that we'll be sharing on our social media and on YouTube. If you don't already, I encourage you to follow us on Twitter at PositiveCoachUS, on Facebook at Positive Coaching Alliance, and then also on Instagram at PositiveCoachUS. This, Google Hangout is open to all of our triple impact competitor scholarship applicants. So I want to thank you all for applying, and a huge, huge thank you to Deloitte for sponsoring this program over the last few years. We really appreciate your support, and we wouldn't be able to do the Deloitte mentorship program or the scholarship program without your support. And so tonight, again, for another year, we have Billy Downing here to share his expertise with us on the college application process. And Billy is the founder of the ESM Group, and he has helped hundreds, thousands of families get into the colleges of their choice, and he's the real expert on this. So I'm excited to turn it over to Billy. So take it away, Billy.
Thanks, Casey, and good to be back again, and welcome to all you who are tuning in at home. So what I want to start by doing tonight is sort of lay the landscape for how you put together a game plan for college. And obviously there's so many different ways to go about this process. My hope is that tonight I can give you just a few tips to think about what right path you need to take in terms of finding the right fit college. And so we'll talk a little bit about trends in college admissions. We'll talk about how colleges decide who gets in. We'll certainly talk about standardized testing and especially the SAT redesign. We'll talk a little bit about category admits, and then we'll talk specifically about the hook and how that relates to the college essay. And so last year, again, the numbers just continue to increase. And, we had over 3 million kids apply to U.S. colleges last year. We anticipate for this fall that we'll see 3.5 million kids applying. So that's a 500,000 increase between this year and last year. And we only see those numbers continuing to grow, primarily being driven by students from overseas and other parts of the country that are now deciding that they want to pursue a 4-year university. So let's talk a little bit about some of the recent trends. And, one of these things that technology does is that it makes it easier to apply to college. And so as a result, what we're seeing are more students applying to more schools. And, while that's really good that colleges can get more applications for more people, it also makes it harder for them to decide who's real. And so if you've applied to 20 or 25 schools, colleges are guessing that pretty much everybody else is doing the same thing. And so colleges have become concerned with their yield. And the problem with that is if a college gives you an acceptance letter and you decide to go somewhere else, that is a challenge for them to deal with. So colleges are now instituting early action, early decision as a way to manage their yield. Colleges are trying to figure out if they give you an acceptance letter, what is the percentage chance that you're going to say yes? So whatever you can do as a student to make each college feel special, to make each college feel like that you will come, that will actually help in your favor. And so one of the other ways that colleges have been trying to manage their yield is by adding the wait list. And in the last few years, you've seen schools that have predominantly never had the wait list, like the UCs, and they've gone to the wait list in a sense to take a fewer number of kids in the regular and early rounds, put a larger number of kids on the wait list, and then wait to see who comes back. And so that's been a very effective way. So the advice that I would give all of you guys, that if you do get put on the wait list, don't just sit back. Don't just say, oh man, I didn't get in, I'm on the wait list, I just have to wait. The thing that you should be doing at that point is going on a mission to educate that school that you want to be there more than anything. So that means by visiting them again, that means by writing them emails, that means by sending additional letters of recommendation. One of the other trends that we continue to see is this focus on what we call demonstrated interest. And that sort of ties back to what we just talked about with the wait list and the are trying to figure out if you are serious about them. They're going to ask, did you interview with us? Did you visit campus? Did you write to us? Did you go to one of our events? They are trying to determine, have you shown a demonstrated interest in that university? So again, as much as you can show that college or any college that you are really interested in their programs, that's what you really want to do. And then obviously, you guys have seen in the news that there's a greater push for international students. And so we're seeing more international students apply from China, from India, from South America, as well as Europe. But you're also seeing more colleges being willing to take those international students. So this gives you a little bit of the flavor of what the acceptance rate last year were. Stanford at 5%, Harvard at 6%, Brown at 9%. USC for the first time cracked 20% and is now 18%, making it one of the more competitive universities over the last 4 or 5 years. So, what it shows you is that getting into some of the elite schools can be really challenging, but that, someone has to get in. But then again, you come over here and you look at schools like BU and New York University, Santa Clara, TCU, which is one of the hottest schools. And these schools have much, much stronger acceptance rates. TCU accepted 49% of the students that applied, and it's one of the more popular schools as of the last 2 or 3 years. So you don't have to just apply to schools that are at 5 or 6% acceptance rates. There's over 3,000 universities in the US. You have to find the right mix. So let's talk a little bit about the different application types. And you're going to see schools continue to move these application types. So it's really important that you don't rely on things like Naviance or your school counselors for this information, because it does change year to year. You need to go to each school's website to determine what their deadlines are, what application types they have, and what's available for the year that you're applying. The first application type is rolling. And rolling means that they evaluate the application as they come in. So in many instances, a student is benefited by applying early. So if you know that a school applies, is looking at rolling applications, getting your application there on September 1st or August 1st versus waiting till December 31st is often beneficial. Early action is traditionally due on November 1st to the 15th, and you generally find out before the end of the year if you were accepted or waitlisted. The thing with early action is to make sure you understand that it is non-binding. So if you get accepted to that school, you are not required to attend. If you want to go, great. If you want to give them an answer, that's great. But you have until May 1st. Early action single choice is only 4 schools in the United States that have it: Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. And while single choice early action sort of sounds nice, it's actually the most difficult of these application types to manage. And what it means is, let's say at Stanford, you apply single choice early action on November 1st. That means that you can only apply to Stanford as the one private school, but then you can apply to one public school. So you can only at a maximum apply to 2 schools during the early round. Then you have to wait to see what Stanford says before you can apply to your regular decision schools. Early decision is the one that moves the needle the most. And what I mean by that is you often have the best chance of getting into an elite school if you utilize early decision. But it also means that if you're accepted, you have to go. So it is a binding contract between you and the university. Those are generally due November 1st, and you usually find out before the end of the year. Regular decision is usually due on January 1st, and you find out some type of decision between March and April. So let's talk a little bit about why early decision is so important. And one of the reasons is obviously there, in most cases, is a better statistical chance of getting in early decision. But the other thing to think about is that these schools are filling big chunks of their classes in the early decision round. And so last year, Penn filled 49% of its class during the freshman early decision round. Vanderbilt filled 44%. So if you have these really good schools who are filling up 50% of their class in the early round, that's only leaving a 50% space for the regular round, where the applicant pool will be 4 or 5 times larger. So if you can apply to a school that has early decision and it is your number one choice and you're really geared up to go there, it can be a significant advantage. This slide just gives you a little bit of an example of the difference between early decision versus early action. And so, it's pretty clear. Look at a place like Duke or Penn. In early decision, the acceptance rate is 25%. And in overall and regular, it drops to 11 to 10%. Now that's significant. So again, a student who is prepared to file their application and believes that a Duke or a Penn is a great fit can really increase their odds of getting into one of those schools if they go early decision. So let's talk a little bit about the University of California. And these are the UC campuses that exist now. The challenge with the UCs is they've received a lot of negative press over the last few years. They're currently $1 billion over budget, but the UC still represents the best public education, not just in California, but really in the United States. And it's still, even though the cost has increased, is still a fraction of a private school. And for that reason, people are applying to the UCs in droves. Last year, UCLA was the most applied to school, not just in California, not just in the United States, but in the world. Between freshman applicants and transfers, they received over 100,000 applications. That makes it the most popularly applied school in the world. The biggest challenge that we're seeing out of the UCs is, yeah, we are seeing a lot of people applying, but we are seeing a significant rise in the number of out-of-state students that certain campuses are taking. In 2004, there was 5.3%. In 2018, it's 20%. That's a big, big, big chunk of students that are applying from out of state. And the reason that the UCs want out of state or international students is that the tuition and fees is nearly double that than that of the California residents. Let's talk a little bit about the application process. So what are colleges looking for? Well, first they're looking for a rigorous curriculum. Did you take the hardest classes available to you at your school? That doesn't mean you have to be in all AP or honors classes. It just means that you took a rigorous curriculum at your school that was sort of the most and toughest classes that you could take. It doesn't have to be compared to everybody else. It just means that you took the toughest classes you could. They're looking at your grade point average. They're looking at your class rank, especially in the rounds of early decision. If you have the class rank of number 1 and one of your friends who's number 5 is both applied to the same school, oftentimes the student who has the higher rank will be able to get in. They're going to look at your SAT, they're going to look at your ACT, they're going to look at your SAT subject exams. They're trying to get a sense of what your standardized test scores are. They're going to look at outside activities, clubs, and sports, and what this means is leadership. They are looking for the leadership that you have sort of had during your high school career. Are you just someone who's in a lot of clubs but doesn't really do anything? Or are you someone who has 1 or 2 passions and you're really, really involved and you've shown great leadership? That's what they're looking for. And obviously for the schools that use personal statements and supplement essays, they're going to be reading those as well as your letters of recommendation. So let's talk a little bit now about the standardized testing component, because there's been some, recent changes there. Number one, test scores are not the most important factor. They're not the only thing. Test scores are just a part of this, and neither the SAT or the ACT are really about innate intelligence. It's just about, how quickly can you work and how can you figure out the shortcuts and how best prepared are you for that test. So, a lot of kids say, but I don't test well. Well, that's not always the case. Sometimes you're just not prepared. And so if you don't feel you're a good test taker, don't give up before you started. Practice, 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 and find a study method that works for you. And then start early. If you're trying to take the test as a junior, start preparing as a freshman. If you're trying to take the test as a senior, start preparing as a sophomore. But don't wait to the 3 or 4 weeks before the test before you start to prepare. And then if you're convinced that you're just not a great tester and you need to look at schools that are test optional or test flexible, fairtest.org will give you a list of schools that don't require the SAT or the ACT. And that number is growing each year. So obviously there's been a lot in the news about the SAT being redesigned. And so I'm not going to go into the details of the exam, what's changed and how it's changed. You can read all about that on College Board's website. But one thing I would tell you is that those of you who are juniors, who are considering the new SAT, I think you really need to focus on, is this really the best idea for me? And what I mean by that is you're essentially taking a test that is unproven. We don't know what the colleges are going to think about it. We don't know what they're going to do about it. We don't know how they're going to view those scores or what those scores are going to be like. You're essentially a guinea pig this year. So if you're a junior, you may really want to focus on the old SAT or on just taking the old SAT and not ever having to take the new SAT. If you are a sophomore or freshman, you have time to wait and see what's going to happen with the new SAT before you decide before ACT or SAT. And obviously, if you're a senior this year applying to college by November or December, then you have the option to take the current SAT, which is what we're calling the old SAT, and the ACT. And so you won't have an option to even take the new SAT until March. So it doesn't really apply to seniors. But really, you have to educate yourself on the exam that's the best fit for you. And that means taking a practice test, talking to your counselors at school, and figuring out which test you can do better at. So a lot of people, ask, why did the SAT change? And it's really just a simple answer. It isn't about making a more fair test or doing this or doing that. It's about the SAT wanting to become more like the ACT, because for the first time, the SAT was second place to the ACT. The SAT has been the perennial number one test taken by the most kids, and last year, the ACT, more kids actually took that exam. So, a couple things to think about now. You've taken and worked really hard in your grades. You've taken your standardized tests. You've taken your subject tests. You've gotten your applications ready. Let's talk a little bit about how colleges tend to bucket people and put them into special places. Legacy connection. Did mom or dad go there? Donation history. Did mom or dad give to your school? Do they have the capacity to give to your new school? Are you an underrepresented race or ethnicity? Are you a celebrity? Are you a recruited athlete? Recruited athletes are still a huge component of this process because they get priority in the admissions process at many universities. Socioeconomic and geographic information, what that really means is, are you coming from an area that's really impoverished, but you've worked really hard and you didn't have the same opportunities, but you've still done well? That's something that the schools want to know. Or do you have some exceptional talent? And so what also plays into that as they're looking through the application and considering institutional priorities, they're also looking for what is your hook? What makes you different? What makes you unique? And that's really, really important. The hook is usually an activity or a program or something that you have done that demonstrates leadership, it demonstrates creativity, and it demonstrates an initiative that goes beyond the usual stuff that's off the shelf. So this isn't really like, oh yeah, I was just a member of my club at my school and that was important to me. This is more like, I saw a need in my community for a sports program, so I went out and created my own sports program for kids in my area. Or I knew that my school needed a French club, so I started the French club. And the idea here is that you have to show that this is you wanting this. This is you doing this, and this is your passion. So, the hooks can be academic, they can be intellectual, or they can be service oriented, but they're often best when they sort of work against the grain. And the story that I always like to share is about a young man of mine who was a football player, who was this big tall guy and strong and sort of this macho man. And on Fridays he would be playing football, but on Saturday afternoons he would go and volunteer his time at a women's shelter where the women had been battered, and he would spend time playing with their kids and talking with this women. And that's what he did for 3 years as part of his service project and made that part of his hook. And that was a really interesting story that he talked about, the dichotomy between being a football player but then also going through this process and volunteering at this women's shelter. A hook is not some summer program that you did in Europe. It's not something that you pay for. It's not summer school. It's not these national leadership conferences, which, by the way, are great to go for social reasons. But a lot of you guys will get in the mail these national student leadership conferences, and it's like $3,000 or $4,000 to go to them. You should go to those things for other reasons, but you shouldn't go to them because you think they're going to be your hook. So let's just talk about some, broad-based advice. And some of this guys may be very generic, but it's good to sort of reinforce it. Number one, the best grades and the best test scores, higher is always better. If you can get an A plus versus a B plus, that's better. If you can get a 2300 on the SAT over a 2200, that's better. So if that means that you've got to work a little harder in your classrooms, if that means you've got to do some extra credit to go from the B plus to the A minus, do it. Do it. The difference between a B plus and an A minus across 4 years is huge. Okay. If it means taking the SAT or the ACT one more time, even though that might be your third or fourth time, and it only brings you up 10 or 20 points, do it. It is so important and so valuable to try and make your grades and your test scores as high as possible. I always like to tell everybody that when you go in freshman year, you're top of your class. So you don't want to squander that. So, if you're a freshman listening to this, what you should be thinking about is I go into this school year, I'm number one in my class, and I'm going to work as hard as I can to stay at the very top. The schools that you're applying to, you need to be looking at what are the SAT and the ACT medians. Where does that 50 percentile, fit? If I have a 1500 on the SAT, am I going to get into Harvard? You can't say that you're not going to get into Harvard, but you could probably reasonably say that it's going to be very, very difficult to get into Harvard. So you have to be realistic based on where your test scores are when you're looking at your application. You shouldn't make your decision solely based on test scores, but you need to have that as one of the consideration parts. And that also goes back to apply wisely to a range of schools. Like we talked about at the earlier part of this webinar, there's over 3,000 four-year universities in the United States. You can get a great education at a lot of schools. This isn't about getting into the best schools. This is about getting into the best fit school. Use your imagination and take chances. Think outside the box. I know those are really generic kind of suggestions, but one year I had a student who decided to write his college essays on the bottom of his basketball shoes, and he sent that into his number one school. It was a risk, but it paid off and he got in. So the idea here is that you don't have to always do everything like everybody else does. If you want to send in a video, if you want to send in some artwork or photographs, if you have something that's really unique and you want to give it a shot, go for it. Don't be afraid to take risks. And then lastly, just realize that admissions is a bit of a crapshoot, and you could do everything that you're told to do and still not get in. But if you do all the things that we've talked about and you have a wide-ranging list, you're going to get into lots of schools and have lots of choices. So just the last few things that I want to share with you guys, which is always really important. Start the process early. If you're a senior and you're not already done with your college essay and you're not already going on your Common App and your UC app, you need to get going on that tonight. Like, you cannot let another day go by. Be careful what you put on social media. If you think the colleges are not looking at your social media, you're very, very naive. They know everything about you, including what you're putting on social media. Get feedback on your essays from people you trust. You don't need to ask 20 people for their feedback, but you should have one or two people that you really trust who are looking at your essays, making sure that there's no silly mistakes, making sure that the content's solid, and making sure, number one, that your voice comes through. This is your essay, not anybody else's. Submit on time, don't miss deadlines. Once you miss a deadline for college, you've sort of missed the boat. And we always say, keep the dinner table for dinner. At dinner with your family, don't talk about college. It's not the place. Enjoy yourself, have fun, take the stress out. If you want to talk about college, set up a 15-minute meeting with your parents once a week and say, this is the 15 minutes that we're going to talk about what I'm doing for college and what I need to do. But don't do it over the dinner table. And then the last thing that obviously we always share with our kids, no matter what, is this isn't about getting into the highest ranked school. This isn't about getting into the best school. Harvard's a great school. Stanford's a great school. Berkeley's a great school. But maybe it's not a great school for you. This is about finding the right fit college, a place where you're going to be happy and thrive. And what that really means is that you're going to be happy socially, you're going to be happy academically. And when you put those two things together, that makes a really special college experience. So guys, listen, I really appreciate your time, and I hope that these tips were helpful. And I know all of you are very, very busy, so wish you guys all the best. I know that this resource will be available to you guys in the future. And if you guys ever need anything, you can find the links on the YouTube page to email me, and I'm certainly happy to help in any way I can. Best of luck to all of you. And Casey, thanks to you and the rest of the PCA team for having me back for another year. Always good to be with you guys.
Yeah, Billy, thank you so much. And I just had a couple quick follow-up questions if you have a couple more minutes. Obviously, a lot of people who are going to watch this probably are playing sports in high school. And I'm wondering, if they're considering Division I, Division II, Division III as far as that level of play, what are some tips for evaluating which school would be the right fit for them?
So that's a great question. And, obviously for student athletes, there's another part of the onion that they have to peel back as they consider which school is a great fit for them. Because you're trying to figure out, is this coach the right fit for me? Is this program the right fit for me? Is the team, is somewhere where I'm going to be happy and thrive? But, it's really important to first make a decision based on the school, based on academically and socially within the university. Second is to make a decision based on the philosophy of the program, the philosophy of the coach, and whether you like the players on that team. And the last thing about it, I think that's really important for kids to, consider is that oftentimes, if you go into a Division I program like I did at UC Berkeley, you might be a standout, at the high school level, but you might spend 2 years sitting on the bench in a Division I program because you've got two really good guys ahead of you, and you might not be able to see a lot of playing time until junior and senior year, and you might be okay with that, and that might also be a problem. Oftentimes, if you're a D1 quality player or a D2 quality player that has great academics, sometimes D3 can be a really enticing opportunity because the competition is generally a little bit less. The physical talent of the students is not as competitive, and it offers you the opportunity to go to a smaller school, get a great education, and play as a freshman. But ultimately, what I would advise everybody is, if you're a student athlete, you making the choice based on a student first, athlete second. You never know when that coach is going to leave and go somewhere else. You never know when that program is going to get pulled. And so the question that you have to ask yourself when you're picking your final school is, would I still want to go to school here if this coach and this program wasn't here?
Great, thank you. And then just the last follow-up question, you mentioned towards the end that college admissions officers do look at, social media profiles. And we know that, many coaches have said that they do look at their recruits' social media, but you're saying that even if these student athletes aren't planning on playing a sport in college, that the admissions officers also look at their profiles, correct?
The best rule of thumb that I can give any young person is, don't put anything on the internet you don't want somebody to see. The fact that you guys think that somebody, whether it's a coach, whether it's an admissions officer, that somebody is not looking at this stuff and somebody's not doing their homework, you're just really naive. These people have a tremendous amount of information at their hands. You're going through a very competitive selection process at all these schools, and you better believe that people are looking and trying to find out anything they might need to know. And I know from personal experience that coaches, especially, if they find stuff that's on your social media that they would believe that calls into question your character as a member of their program, oftentimes they'll just stop recruiting you on the spot. So it is really, really important that if you are on social media, that you're very transparent, that you're not hiding anything, and that you keep it really clean.
Great. Well, Billy, thanks again for your time. And if anybody watching the Hangout or watches it later on our YouTube channel, you can feel free to reach out to me directly with any questions. My email address is Casey, CASEY_Miller, MILLER @positivecoach.org. And again, thank you, Billy, who is from the ESM Group, and I'm sure he's willing to take questions as well. So feel free to reach out to both of us. And thank you, Billy.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Best of luck to everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.